was born on July 12th, 1947, which makes me 70, almost 71. And this happened, the whole Kalama Valley, my involvement started about 47 years ago. It was initiated that was when I was pregnant with Sasha, I was 7 months pregnant with Sasha. My background was really all typical, I guess, Japanese daughter growing up. You know, just very reserved, didn't talk too much except if I knew the answer. And then, but I mean, this was kind of all foreign to me, except for the fact that prior to this, we had been involved with the anti-war movement, and I got really politicized at that point. That's how I met Lucy and John and Cole, and of course many other people. But at that point, the whole injustice of people, people's land and livelihood and culture being killed at that point was really, I mean, it really struck me as being an important issue to stand up for. Granted, even if I was involved in the anti-war movement, I played a background role. I can remember, you know, stuffing envelopes and then cooking for so many people at the Willie Koki house with Betty and yeah. So we were all.
With who?
Betty Johnson.
Betty Johnson. Walter.
Betty and Walter Johnson. Yeah, they had this great house that we lived in actually for a while. Yeah. And we had our puppies there. Anyway.
Where was this house?
Oh, Kailua. Yeah. So you go all the way down, and it's not Oniava, but the last street down. And then it's Kalaheo. Yeah, it was right off of that, towards the beach. Yeah, right on the beach. Many stories about that. If you ever want to get into that. Like I said, I was raised as a very typical Japanese daughter, you know, did well in school, thought grades were so important because my family thought that was the way you got ahead. And it's the whole issue of pride, you know, the family, and don't do anything that's going to make us shame, you know, not at all. So that was all very much inculcated into my whole, being raised. I went to nursing school. This was prior to getting involved in the anti-war movement, and I guess I should say.
What year?
This was 66. I graduated from Farrington in 1965.
65.
And in 66, 67, I was at the university, but 68.
And you went to UCLA, right?
I went to UCSF.
Oh, USSF.
Yeah, San Francisco Medical Center. And I can remember my dad saying, no, you can't go because, you know, we don't want to pay for you out there. And then, of course, my brother was anyway, I probably shouldn't go into that. But I applied, I got in, and then I told my mom and dad, you know, I got in, so, hey, you know, maybe can you support me a little bit so I can go there? And, you know, at that point they were very willing, because they thought, okay, well, you took some initiative, you know, we'll support you. While I was there, that's when I started getting more politicized in terms of the anti-war movement. We would go to Berkeley, my friend and I, my nursing school colleague and I, and her boyfriend, he was going to Berkeley, so every weekend we'd go to Berkeley, and we'd see a lot of the activity that was happening at that time. A lot of foment. I mean, there's so many people on the streets, and I thought, this is scary. This is scary to me, you know. I mean, I was in awe of what they were doing, but at the same time, I thought, I don't know if I can do that, you know, at this point. I don't know if I can do that. But I started thinking, well, if people are so moved to move on their beliefs, that was something that was important to me, and I felt like I should make up my mind too and do something. So it was then that summer that I came back and I met Cole and at that time Wayne Hayashi.
The summer of what?
Summer of 68, because we got married in 60, you got married in 69.
Yeah, we got married.
So I got married in 68. So yeah, there was quite a quick romance there from beginning of summer until September when we got married. But I mean, part of it was really being in awe and just proud of what other people were doing, and then really looking at myself and I'm saying like, gee, you know, what does it matter? There's something wrong here because you're not willing to put your life on the line. And at that point it was kind of like life on the line, because you know there were draft resistors and Dana Park had gone to prison. And I know for myself, I thought, well, any day Ko could get picked up, arrested, and taken away. So it was all of this anxiety about that, but at the same time kind of driving me towards, you got to do something. You can't just, you know, just sit back. And of course at the same time,
Cole had burned his draft card at that point.
yeah, they had already, he and John and Stan Masui, had already burned their draft card. There was a huge news article in the picture. I remember the picture in the newspaper. And my parents, of course, had seen that. Well, they had seen that. They saw that, true. But the earlier part was during the student movement. Ko was a bad boy. This is, you know, this Japanese bad boy. I mean, you know, he will say to the chancellor of the UH because the chancellor pointed at him and said, "Hey, boy," you know. I mean, so I remember he. I mean, of course, and Ko had such a volatile temper to begin with, but I mean that was righteous. I mean, he should have reacted, and he did. But of course, my parents saw that, and they thought, "Oh, this guy, what is the matter with him? His parents must be so, you know, ashamed of him," not knowing that at that point, Ko and I were already going together. And so that was a shock to them. And it was when Ko and I started living together, moved out of the house, lived together. And I remember my dad being so hurt by the fact that I said, no, I'm going to be getting active. I support, you know, Ko and all the other people who are doing this work. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I just know that I support them. And my dad, you know, it's like, brings tears to my eyes because he came to our Trout Street home, and he came and he actually bowed in front of us and said, "Please, please," he begged me, "please don't do this." And I was, of course, very indignant, you know, at that point. This is something righteous, you know, how can you tell me to do something like that? And but inside, I mean, I was more just really hard-headed about that, and I just did not want anything to deter me, because already I was ambivalent, right? It's not like I had, you know, these very strong feelings about doing stuff. And of course, my dad's plead, you know, didn't work. We had decided to get married, and that was in September 1968. And yeah, so anyway, then I started getting more involved with the anti-war movement at that point. And even in that period, playing again more a supportive role, you know, I mean, making signs, stuffing envelopes, like I said earlier, cooking for 100 people on Sunday who would come to converge and just maybe celebrate the fact that that people were on the move and really were struggling against this, and supporting the Vietnamese people whose land and culture and all of that was being, there was genocide against them. So, and two, because we were all being kind of attacked from the outside, you know, how awful you're doing, and what are you, you know, doing with all of this, and excuse me. So, again, I mean, I did not get arrested during that period of anti-war movement. And I kept on, I was going to school for a short period of time, and I just couldn't hack it because I was working full-time at Children's Hospital. But I also supported the fact that people had to do political work, and there was a need for somebody to bring in some money so we could live, and that was my role at the time, and I was okay, that was fine. I got pregnant in early, no, was it early? It was early 1970. By then, I know Lucy and John had gotten married in September '69. There were all kinds of other struggles around the anti-war movement, the Church of the Crossroads. I mean, all of that was happening. I went to Farrington High School for a ceramics class. I thought, okay, well, I'm so stressed, I gotta do something, so let me go there. I'm pregnant, and let me just kind of chill out and see. So I went to Farrington for a summer school course in ceramics, and I got home, and the phone rang. And so I just answered, and there was John on the phone, and he said that, you know, there's people at Kalama Valley whose land is being taken from them, and bulldozers are coming, and do you want to go? I said, I know. So I said, you know, so at that point it was really kind of a much more critical period of time for me, because this is like when I was going to take a stand, and publicly. I mean, I didn't know how public it was going to be, but it's just that it was outside of my normal behind the scenes kind of thing, you know, and I knew if I was John, then something probably was going to happen. But so Linton and I went there, and
John Witeck and...
Oh, I'm sorry, John Witeck and Linton Park, yeah. And it's good that we have this article, because there are a lot of things that I don't remember, and I'm glad I wrote those down for Cole. Because I think he was going to put it in his book that he wanted to write eventually. But it was pretty chaotic, you know, when we got there. The bulldozers had already started. They were planning to eventually go all the way in the back and start from the back and come forward. So we were not that far though in the back. We were kind of still in the corridor. We met Moose Louis. That was the first time I had ever met him. And this wonderful big man with such a big heart, and angry, and sad at the same time. And so then I remember being on the side behind, or on the side of the bulldozer, maybe behind the bulldozer. The bulldozer started, and then John and Linton and I looked at each other, and I thought, are we gonna go there? Are you really gonna go on top of that concert hut and, you know, and sit and maybe get mowed down?
And you were pregnant.
And I was pregnant, 7 months pregnant, yeah. So, but of course I didn't think about the pregnancy at that point. It was like, this was kind of like more a secondary thing, and I was more moved because of the times and that particular action that I thought was so wrong. I mean, it was the same issue as the people in Vietnam whose land was being taken, you know, their whole culture being crushed, and people's lives really being affected to the detriment of themselves and their children and so forth. So I thought, okay, I'm pregnant, I got Sasha, I didn't know who it was there, but I have a child coming, and I don't want the child to think that we didn't do anything. at this time. You know, so same thing for, you know, in terms of anti-war movement, but again, this was more like a more public stance on my part. So it made a lot of difference to me. Because then again, my parents were still on the side saying, you better not do anything that's going to make us more shame. You know, already we've got so much shame in this community because everybody's talking about, oh, the Miyabara girl is like, you know, she's wild, she's gone wild. So as I said, I decided that I would take a stand together with John and Linton. I can remember kind of, I mean, scared, but then at the same time feeling righteous about the fact that we weren't gonna just let this happen. That so many people's lives were at stake, and the farmland that they farmed, which is really should be their land, of course, was being taken over by the leaseholder, who is Henry J. Kaiser, who I had no love for. I mean, Henry J. was like this rich guy, and all he wanted to do was, you know, develop the whole property to make more homes and make a lot of money. So we went up on the, I can recall that it was a Quonset hut, and we sat on the steps, and then this guy, I think his name was Ed Michaels. He was the representative from Bishop Estate. Then so he came up and said, you know, you guys better leave, or else you stand to get arrested. And so at that point, as we looked at each other, I thought, these guys were not, they didn't care. John and Linton were like, okay, hey, you know, do it. And I was like, okay. So I managed to keep my feet planted, my okole on the steps, rather than, you know, abscond at that point. And then I can remember that we found out later that the bulldozer, his name was Tiny. He was this big Hawaiian guy. It looked very, very serious, extremely serious. And then he was given the alert to start, just, you know, start moving. Now he actually refused to do that, which I thought was, all right, that is so great. That's so great, you know. I mean, that here workers whose livelihood too was on the line decided that they would take a stand. So of course there was another guy who came, I think, in his stead, and they started up again. Well, as it turned out, we did not move, and the bulldozer came closer and closer. We still did not move. So finally, of course, they said, okay, stop, because politically or publicly, this will not look very good. Especially with this woman who was 7 months pregnant. And so I think that kind of helped our struggle at that point too, because I was so high with Sasha.
And I'm a fourth person.
yeah, there was a fourth person here. Her name was Sasha Hayashi. It was going to be Sasha Hayashi. So I do remember at that point that there was really nobody around to cheer us on. I mean, we were kind of out there, isolated among ourselves. But it's still at that point, it was, you know, and I felt, well, okay, so that's okay. Actually, it's kind of good that there were no, it wasn't so public, because then I felt a little bit more confident, you know, about doing this action, and felt that this was really an important step for me to take. Could not stand, not standing up. So we got arrested, and I, you know, and frankly, I don't remember what happened after that. I just remember that we were taken down, I think, and then we were thinking we were booked and all of that. We went to trial. There was initially, yeah, I mean, I think there was initially with just us. There was yeah, kind of like a preliminary, and it was like, you know, we don't really want to get involved, not us, but then the powers that be didn't really want to make it a bigger issue. And of course, then when the next group of people who came, you know, not too long after that, who got arrested for trespassing, there was all of, you know, our cases were going to be combined, so we were supposed to be tried, you know, on our own. Now, you know, of course, when you get arraigned and you get arrested and you don't know exactly when the trial is going to start, as it turned out, the court hearing or the trial was set for September 23rd, and it just so happened that my due date was September 22nd, and so. So I was in the hospital. I mean, Sasha came on time. I mean, she came on the 22nd. So I was in the hospital at that time. And my mom, I remember talking to her, and she says, "Oh, I'm so glad you're in the hospital right now, because then maybe your picture won't be in the paper and all of that." But yeah, so it just so happened that it was Judge Akau, who was the presiding judge at that time, and he dismissed the case, you know, and part of it was, I'm sure, because politically it was not feasible for them to just make this a much bigger issue, because they knew by then that there are more people. There are 3 first and there are 9, and there must be others who are going to be standing up and coming forward. So, you know, as much as possible, let's just kind of cool it. So yeah, so the charges were dismissed. So my mom says, "It's good that you weren't convicted. It's really good. I'm glad you're not convicted." And then I had Sasha that time, September 22nd. Thereafter, I kept in touch with Kokua Hawaii, the organization that was formed through Ko. And I remember him going to a lot of meetings, and you know, and a lot of strategizing and all that kind of stuff. But at that point, 3 months after I gave birth to Sasha, I went back to school. So I was full-time at UH nursing school, and then part-time working at Flamingo. I was at Flamingo and I got that job through Lucy Witeck, because she was there already, and then she kind of helped me get that job. So really at that point I was concentrating on completing school, and I was able to do that in 3 months, thank goodness. And that was in '71 already. I graduated from nursing school in May 1971. So as I was on the periphery of the Kokua Hawaii formation and the movement, and again it was through Ko, and I remember a lot of the discussions of the struggles that were going on.
Yeah, what do you remember of how Kokua, Kalama, and Kokua Hawaii were doing the mass organizing? Do you remember any?
I don't.
Oh, it's like it's gone.
I don't. It's gone. But I know there was a lot more activity happening, and more people were being mobilized as this got to be, you know, known, and especially the kind of was the renaissance. I mean, already there was a renaissance of the Hawaiian people's movement, and I think what we did then at Kalama Valley helped to fuel that. You know, I mean, I think that, and that was an important development.
We'll bring it to the forefront.
Yeah,
I mean,
to bring it
seems
to
like
the forefront.
You initialized it.
Well, I'm
four
sure
of
there was
you.
other stuff going on, but yeah, that was something that I thought, okay, well, I can live with that. I think that's really great, you know, even if I'm not that involved right now. The movement continued. There are more people coming forward. Ultimately, there was this a showdown, right, at the house, and I remember people on roofs and, you know, just taking a stand there, and a whole bunch of people getting arrested again. But that was a good thing at that point, because it really helped to mobilize more people. It was like prairie fire, you know, it really was like a prairie fire. The thing is, I guess what I was really struck by with anti-war movement and then on into the Hawaiian people's movement was that the people in those struggles were very supportive. I mean, there are definitely a lot of contradictions. I mean, the chauvinism was rampant.
What kind of chauvinism are you talking about?
Oh, I mean, you know, guys even busting up their spouses and stuff. I mean, it got that bad. The children we had more children at that point. I can remember at some point being part of starting a child care center. And the collective, and all of our kids, you know,
all the political activist kids.
Yeah, Matthew, Sasha, Noel. I mean, so a lot of a good time to be involved, but there was so much struggle. I mean, the whole issue of haole involvement, you know, and can they, should they? No, they shouldn't, because after all, this is really a Hawaiian people's struggle, and we really need to develop our own identity. And so even as support, it was really difficult. I think John probably was the only one who continued to provide that kind of support.
In the background.
In the background. And I think not fully grasping the idea that people need to develop their own integrity and their identity. And that was important to respect. You know, you may not agree with it, but at that point, it was a really important factor in this whole struggle. The struggle was really was a difficult struggle. A lot of contradictions being worked out in the course of all of this stuff, you know. And I was really more at that point on the periphery.
But you did get involved in some of the women's struggles. We went to a women's conference
That's
in
true.
Vancouver.
And yeah, so that was good. We met the Vietnamese people, women, Cambodian. That was in 71, maybe?
I think it was 71.
And so Lucy and I went together with Merle.
And I think Mary.
Mary Brogan. And that was a really, I remember, very, very touching, because here I'm thinking, you know, I got all these different contradictions, you know, I tried to work and do all of this, and then, hey, compared to what these women are dealing with, you know, it's like nothing. I mean, in the scope of everything, it was like just almost insignificant. But that was very inspiring to me, very, very inspiring. And there was, I remember, a dance group that was also formed at that point doing whatever it was. Anyway, just interpretative dance, but it was political. I mean, based on political ideals. In terms of a transition, maybe from Hawaiian people's movement and land struggle to what was being viewed at that point, and probably, I mean, correctly so, that it was really the working class that was really should be in the forefront of any struggle, because if anybody would be losing, had nothing to lose but their livelihood. I mean, it was a workers' struggle, and I think John at that point got a job at UPW, I think, and that's how I got involved in the labor community. I mean, we organized the Labor Community Alliance, and that really was we were really looking at supporting worker struggles. Yeah, and then at that point I got a job organizing and hospital workers. So they have a hospital worker division. And I was hired into that position.
Unit 10.
Yeah, Unit 10.
That's
right. That's right. And you know, I was organizing mainly the blue collar workers in the hospitals, like laundry workers in Queens Hospital. We had people, so-called non-professional but support people at St. Francis Hospital in the respiratory department. Kahuku Hospital, it was all the LPNs and custodians, and who were also being organized. And I was able to, Beverly Manor nursing facility, there was another, but I learned a lot in that in terms of some organizing skills, and those were just really invaluable experiences. I started to get a real healthy, I think, dislike and distrust of the union leadership, because early on, I mean, it was like, wow, workers. I can remember feeling, what am I here? I'm a so-called professional, and then, but I'm not a worker, like what my conception of a working class person was. And so I always felt kind of very humbled in the midst of all of that. I was, I think, I don't know, because I guess because I was a woman, and it would be important to have women leaders. There was more and more of a leadership role that I took in LCA, Labor Community Alliance. But frankly, I didn't like to speak. I still have a hard time speaking in front of everybody, and we had a number of public and demonstrations and all of that we were doing. But the supporting the workers' struggles, and particularly the strike, workers on strike, was important. Remember, but here were working class people who were actually struggling for their jobs and for the right to earn a living. I started working at UPW, got fired from the job because we were too active in vocal in supporting the custodians at the University of Hawaii, who were fighting for their jobs and for against speed up. They needed more people. There was no way that they could do all of these. There was a lot of construction happening, and then all these, they were just getting squeezed and spread out more and more.
This was back in 1975?
That was about, yeah. I mean, definitely we were organizing the UH custodians, I mean, they were organizing us too. I mean, it was definitely a mutual kind of thing, but it was all, we were taking a stand against the union leadership, who at that point said, yes, we support you totally, we are really fighting for you in terms of getting more staff. And that was a lot of bull. I mean, they were not doing anything. And the fact that more and more as we organized, and there was a whole group of custodians and other workers who were then willing to go to the Capitol Rotunda, and we had demonstrations and all of that. And I can remember Henry Epstein and some of the other union leadership looking down from the third floor, second floor, whatever, looking down at the Rotunda, and and I can remember looking up and thinking, geez, you guys really should be playing a different role. So that helped to kind of politicize me more too, in terms of not being so enamored by the so-called working class leaders. And at that point, I mean, because the unions were a very positive development in our overall history, but as that developed, and the union leadership became more and more conservative, and more, of course, sweetheart deals with the bosses, as it were. So I got fired, and I remember there was a trial. We got petitions signed and all of that against my firing. John was my legal counsel. But then this whole firing was kind of out there, and it became more and more of a movement within the union itself. And it politicized a lot of people, and including myself more too. So I got a healthy disrespect for the union leadership that I thought were really, yeah, they were just copying out of their real, what they should be doing. And found out that there were a lot of workers who were very, very much, they were very strong and very, very articulate, really articulate. Same thing with the Hawaiian movement. I mean, I was always so so impressed because when, like Gwen Kim, I mean, when Gwen would speak, or or other people, they were just so eloquent, very eloquent and very passionate, and I like that. I thought that was, that was what we should all be doing.
So you were also, I remember being involved in that. You were involved in the public workers striking back, and then also all these anti-eviction struggles, like San Island, right? Popularized Island, Waihoi, Wakane.
Yeah, and then we would also go and the Chinatown struggle, Third Arm.
Third Arm.
That was all like kind of a. These were all arms of the movement that was fomenting and getting stronger and stronger. And then there was more and more of a movement towards the United Front, really trying to develop rather than everybody just struggling on their own, really trying to pull our resources and our hearts and our minds together to really attack what we thought was just really, really awful in this whole society. Prior to getting that job at UPW, in 1971, right after I graduated, there was a year that I spent in Kahaluu with the Key Project, and I got Randy Kalahiki, who was also involved with Kokua Hawaii. We were talking, and he started saying that he needed workers, community health workers, and I thought, oh, I'm a health worker. I think maybe I can do that, And my whole orientation about health was became very different. It wasn't just an issue of dis-ease, I mean, there's not disease, but it was really looking forward at the whole population, the environment, the political situation, all the ills that we had in society. I mean, the women's struggle, racism, all of that had all been kind of mixed up in that whole thing, in terms of my development, and I even more so got politicized as a result of that. So I worked in Kahaluu for about a year, and helped with the community. We worked with the community and helped to develop what we thought at that point was a free clinic. I mean, here I am so naive about where money comes from and who pays for what, but it was really the the mission of St. Francis under Sister Maureen to really extend the impact into the community. And at that point, there was really no health care on the windward side, at least Kahaluu, Kaneohe, Kahaluu, that area. And so there were so many people with diabetes, there were so many people with heart problems, hypertension, all of these chronic diseases. And oftentimes they were unable to, they didn't have cars oftentimes that worked too well to go across the Ko'olaus to St. Francis Hospital. So we struggled and were able to finally have a clinic actually developed in Kahaluu Elementary School. And I can remember going from house to house with patients who were not able to actually get out of their house. Either we would be making home visits, or we'd be transporting them into the clinic so that they could get health care. So it was at that point too that I guess maybe more with the anti-war movement and people's struggle, it was like health is not a privilege, it's really a right. I mean, I remember the medical community for health MCHR. But they had a real important a perspective and a line that, yeah, health is a right, not a privilege. And that there was a healthy dislike, disagreement with what was the medical industrial complex. It wasn't just, you know, looking at just one small health insurance company or whatever, but it was this really a complex which included the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, everybody who was really fighting to have people continue to stay sick with, and it had a lot to do with the way the healthcare was being paid for. It was all based on care that you provided, as opposed to what is now being done, I think more and more, is that if you keep people healthy, and the whole preventive thing, if you keep people healthy, then you get more money. I mean, because you're providing quality care, and not that you're getting more money as much as you're saving. These health insurance companies were saving, so rather than have people with diabetes go all the way to amputation, they were caught early on. So that was my part of the changing of my views too. So that was important. And when I worked in Kahaluu, we were able to we got some money in Kahaluu. So three of us. Her name was Catherine Cabello, and Catherine at State Hospital. This is a resident doctor, and myself were able to take a trip to the East Coast, and we went in particular to spend time with the Young Lords Party, because at that point too, I mean, there were all of these forums that were happening, right, at the university. Young Lords Party was coming in, and I know we had Daniel Barragan. I mean, there, just a whole bunch of Howard Zinn. I mean, we got to meet some of these, and it was exciting. I mean, because there's a whole different. It really opened up my view about what society was like and what we needed to do to actually change things, and it felt like we could actually make some major changes. I mean, it really felt that way at that particular point. In spite of all of the other contradictions that we had, there was a momentum that had been growing, and so many people, more people on the move. So working at Kahaluu, the Key Project was really a politicizing event for me too. I know too that I had gained such a deep respect for the youth at that project, who were there was a school that was there, and it was for high-risk kids. And I remember the faculty teacher was Paul. I forget his last name, but really nice guy, and just very, very local. And he was able to really relate to all these kids. Yeah, Paul, Japanese guy. But he really taught me a lot about, how the kids were developing, what their why their situation was so difficult. There was such a high incidence of pregnancy there, just drug use, all of that. I mean, right in that it was a microcosm of what society was like. And I remember that talking with some teachers who would say, the kids here are, I mean, these are teachers who had not had very much contact with them, but they were like in the regular schools. But there were some people, of course, with very, very incorrect ideas about how stupid these kids are. I mean, they don't know nothing. They can't add, 2 and 2 and that kind of. I mean, so I remember hearing that, and with one particular guy, I remember that was kind of the word that came down from the DOE. And then as we were talking, I mean, this kid knew his family owned a pig farm, and so he knew every single thing about how to raise pigs, how much food to give, if one of the pigs got ill, what dosage and what medication was being used, doing mathematical calculations for all as related to that. And I thought, this is good. I mean, this is, you're really putting your education to work. And so that's another thing that I learned, and I thought that it was a really good education for me, and really humbling. I really appreciated all of that. I think, yeah, so what I said earlier was that it really helped to fuel. I'm not sure about really initiating, although at that point it did feel like it, that it was kind of like one of the sparks towards developing the Hawaiian movement of consciousness, the righteousness of the land struggle, how the āina, was so dear to us, and it was always, I mean, from the very early times, of course, being taken from Hawaiian people. In fact, a lot of the, not a lot, but a number of the community people in Kahaluu had their land taken from them, because at that time, way back when, I mean, not too long before that, there were newspaper articles about this, these taxes had to be paid for this land, and people, of course, at that point did not have newspapers, or were not even conscious of that, and their land was just taken, right from under them. So there was a righteous anger that I think developed, that was motivating, and I think as a result of the Hawaiian people's movement, the Renaissance, I think there was more and more of a sense of the consciousness of being Hawaiian, and the pride that definitely developed. In fact, I was feeling kind of bad because I didn't even have any part Hawaiian in me. I was thinking, because it was almost kind of like you're exalted, in a sense. I mean, kind of grew in that way, and that was totally wrong. I mean, that was not what was really happening. But wow, I wish I could be Hawaiian too, because then it would be more. Even with all the ills and all the contradictions that occurred. The tie with working people's movement, the issue that it was not just the land issue, but it was the whole issue of capitalism, and then of course imperialism. And as we made the correct analysis of what the Vietnam War meant, in terms of the U.S. imperialism, earlier French, I mean, so all of that, and how that was just destroying our whole society, and we were, if we were not doing anything, we would be complicit. And it's kind of like now, in terms of Trump, if you're not saying anything or doing something, then, you may not be feeling like you agree, or you vehemently disagree, but our silence does speak to complicity, and capitalism, imperialism, the role of the people's struggles. I got politicized as a result of some of that, because I was able to go to China for I think it was maybe a 2-month period, and just seeing the people there and what was happening. I mean, they were really moving mountains. They were really building these humongous, beautiful bridges with very little tools. I mean, but it was really the people on the move, and the whole issue of serving the people, because that was very, very important. And so when I looked at my role in Kahaluu, it was also the issue of how can I best serve the community within the skills and motivation that I had at that point. And the more and more, I think there was a big beginning of there's some theory here. It's not just having to develop everything on our own, and there was nothing out there, but there were actually was literature, there were books that were, and there were people who were progressive who also were able to speak to that and to the need to touch people's lives. So that really affected me at that point too. That was kind of like an offshoot of the anti-war movement, involvement in that, and then of course with Kalama Valley and so forth. And of course when it came to worker struggles, it was, you know, the whole looking at what was happening in China and the whole the proletariat there taking up arms and actually being led by Mao. And I really had a lot of respect for his writings, for him and his writings. I was able to see when I went to China the barefoot doctors. They were amazing, and it was all this whole the whole thought that it wasn't how skilled you were, but it was your redness, how much you really were deeply involved and wanting to serve the community. So it was red versus expert. I mean, that was one thing that really became very clear to me, and I would rather have been red than expert. And it was, I mean, so that kind of moved me more and more in terms of trying to develop my political views on things and reading more and more and more. And I think a lot of the people in the Hawaiian movement too, I mean, there was a lot of that starting to happen as there were other forces coming in and saying, you know, there is a science here. It's not just practice. There are theories here, and there are things that we can learn from the past as a vision towards the future. And I thought that was good because that's what I wanted my children to have. I mean, I wanted them to be able to take advantage of whatever struggles we had and we made to be able to make this world a better place. And it sounds very trite in a sense, but I really believed it, right? A lot of us really just believed that, and that it was possible. I think I did not know enough, understand enough about how large the forces of imperialism are, and that, and how long it took China and of course other socialist countries to actually develop people's minds. I mean, so that you're not just looking at the capitalism thing, but you really are looking at more of a socialist kind of system. And that, I think, I didn't understand enough of that, so I thought, oh, this is going to be so good, you know, we're going to be able to move ahead. But, I mean, it takes so long for people to move, to change our whole culture is built on this, and developing our minds and moving forward on that is a very difficult road, very difficult road. And so I admire the people who at this point continue to do that kind of work. I don't feel comfortable about going out there right now, but I definitely admire what people are doing. And not just here, I'm not talking here, I'm talking about, you know, just nationally and then internationally, how people are coming forward. Recognizing that because in China it took a cultural revolution plus more to be able to make that kind of change. So I see, while I think the vision is, you know, is really going towards socialism and communism, which I theoretically still believe in, how difficult the road is ahead, and that you kind of want to shield your children from having to do that kind of struggle, but at the same time, it's a shame if they don't. And being very proud that Gabrielle, one of our grandchildren, is actually took a lead in that, and then now he and a group of high schoolers are getting together to really try and develop strategy. Now it's all very, very, yeah, I mean, just at the beginning, but they're learning about politics in terms of who can you trust, who, you know. I think they're going through a period where it's so hard to also develop strategies to mobilize more and more students. So I think that's something that they still are not doing that well. I mean, but that comes, I mean, as we know, I mean, it takes a long time to do that, but I think their consciousness is being developed that way. And
But we all were.
yeah, well,
we all were.
We all were. No, that's true, and we survived.
And we survived, and we understood that, right?
Yeah.
We read the books there. That's probably in your bookshelf, and you could see it too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing of the
That will
literature.
be right.
I mean, we all had to take a stand. I mean, when you three of you were sitting in the Quonset hut, I mean,
It's such a positive thing to see that the youth are coming forward, and they are doing it without adults or people on the side of them saying, this is what you should do. I mean, I know with Gabe's group, they really are, I mean, maybe to a fault, they're saying that we don't want that kind of input. We want to just be able to develop our own identity.
Yeah, they need to have their own identity.
Yeah, they do. I mean, like you know, with the Hawaiian people's struggle, it was that issue of, because for how long are you just downtrodden? You're stupid, you can't do nothing, and all of that kind of stuff, and not having that kind of pride in yourself and the people that you're with, that you can actually do something to remedy the whole situation. Yeah, so they're going through some struggle now, so that's important. But they do take a kernel of that truth, and are actually trying to struggle through that. And what's this whole process? And, the methods, and really what is that orientation?